We're going to talk about the bosses in Elden Ring Nightreigne. I think these are some of the absolute best bosses From Software has ever cooked up, so I'm going to put them into a tier list, discussing them in the order in which they appear in-game, starting with Gladius, Beast of Night. A many-legged beast appeared from shadow, carrying on its back a chain-link sword used to hunt its prey. Between the fangs of its many heads flicker overwhelming flames. When assailed by multiple shadows, only sacred light can hinder the hunt. Ever since I watched the first trailer for the game, I knew that Fluffy here was going to be an excellent boss. Elden Ring Nightreigne was designed with 3 players in mind, and what better way to introduce that mechanic to the game than with a boss that splits into 3. Gladius is really fast, without the need for very many flashy attacks, causing him to go from one side of the arena to the other. He's just a really big dog, and him simply running at you is enough for him to close the distance on whoever his target is almost instantly. He may offer you a few bites, but he'll frequently jump back out of the action to try and hit you from afar with a giant chain he has wrapped around his neck. These attacks look amazing and are deceiving in their dodge timings. If you get lucky enough to go behind him, there's very little Gladius can actually do, and with generous posture breaks, you'll often find you and your team closing in on him to deal some critical damage. When he breaks into 3, however, things get a bit more intense, and is, unfortunately, the most disappointing part of the fight. I thought a boss splitting into 3 against 3 players was a great idea. Have the team split their focus on one of the dogs each, but more often than not, all 3 dogs run towards the same player, which can become blatantly unfair as you have so many attacks coming at you at once that avoiding the damage is simply impossible. However, with your teammates coming to your rescue, this is only usually a problem for around 10 seconds, and the fight does become more fair again. Everdark Sovereign Tricephalos is the most difficult of the bunch, I would say, and I feel like it's not even close. The amount of damage this puppy deals with attacks that affect across continents is absolutely ruthless, demanding that you be at the absolute top of your game and nail those dodges. Combine that with an enormous health bar and you have what is undoubtedly the hardest Everdark version of the lot. The music is also my least favorite of the bunch. That's not to say it's bad by any means, I just think it's the most, generic? Simple sounding? At least until Phase 3 starts and then the brass unleashes itself fully. Overall, I like Gladius. I think he's a good introduction fight, and I think if they had it so that the triple dogs were more consistently split into the 3 players, it would elevate this fight to S tier. Adel, Baron of Night, a colossal, crooked, black frame capable of harboring lightning, with massive jaws lined with grinding teeth to devour anything and everything it encounters. Only poison will stop it in its tracks. Gaping Jaw is definitely an appropriate name for this guy. From the second he arrives onto the field, you are at the mercy of his relentless sweeping attacks from his disgusting, sideways opening jaw. He slams the ground and drags his face forward, carving the ground with his teeth like a snowplow. It almost feels like he's leaning into you as he lunges, fueled only by rage and the sheer weight of his jaw. You can feel this weight, not only in the amount of damage that he deals, but also in the animations. It clearly looks like Adel is burdened by the size of his mouth, with him struggling to maintain balance and being pulled slightly in the direction he's lifting from when he's recovering from an attack or preparing a follow-up. Of all the Nightlords, Adel is the most susceptible to his weakness. Poisoning will cause him to stand in place for about 10 seconds as he vomits the poison out of his system. None of the other Nightlords are quite this susceptible, so always make sure to prioritize bringing poison with you for this fight. You can also use this poison to force him to spit out any Night Fairies he may have started eating for his grab attack, which was usually my friend Venexus. He stands in one place chomping on them, and while this does heal him, it provides ample opportunity for interruption. The Baron of Night was the first Everdark Sovereign to be released, and what a banger to release first. This version has a giant tornado form, and you must use a Spirit Stream to jump over it and into the Eye of the Storm, where the enhanced Gaping Jaw awaits for you. This fight is absolute chaos, with lightning attacks being unleashed left, right, and center. The same relentless head slams are still here, but in a much smaller arena, and his weakness to poison has been removed. The music really emphasizes his size, the slow notation and thumping drums signifying his heavy and foreboding footsteps. It's also one of the more tense tracks, I would say. Take this part at the end of Phase 2. To me, this really does feel like the fate of the world and everyone in it relies on the outcome of this fight. And you know it's chaos when you have From Software using electric guitar in the soundtrack. Adel constantly sells his scale and menace while still playing fair with the player. It's a brilliant fight all around, an excellent statement piece for Nightrign, and certainly deserving of the S tier rating. The sentient pest, Gnoster, Wisdom of Night, a flying insect and living shears that trail the earth. Those lucky enough to escape the former's reign of magic light fall victim to the shears. If moth poison is ingested, it will eat through the host, a parasite that cannot be removed alone. I'll be honest, after my first playthrough of Nightrign, these bugs were the absolute worst for me. My frustration mainly comes from the moth, I think. It feels like a sentry turret constantly farting a miasma of poison that covered half the arena. This isn't your standard run-of-the-mill cloud either. This is an extremely lethal and widespread cloud that will kill you much faster than you expect. Their health bar is shared, so you might think the same as me and simply focus on the Scorpion instead. But it's not that simple, as it can frequently harden its shell, making it immune to any and all damage, which is a mechanic I really dislike, especially if I'm playing Wilder and he decides to get hard right as I'm blowing my load. The second phase has Gnoster and Fortis combined together, and makes some minor improvements to the fight that makes it more tolerable. This is probably the boss that you can manipulate the moveset of the most in Nightrign. By staying behind the duo, the pool of attacks is reduced massively, though you still have to avoid some poison and scorpion ground attacks, charge attacks, and most egregious of them all, immovable light beams. I wish I could say the Everdark Sovereign makes some improvements to the fight, but personally, it takes my frustration from the first phase and multiplies it, as the appearance of Animus Ascendant Light means that you can have all three, Gnoster, Fortis, and Animus, all active and equally as aggressive, unleashing spam upon spam, and it just feels cheap a lot of the time. Gnoster, Wisdom of Night is undoubtedly, by a mile, the happiest song FromSoft have ever created. Tai Tomisawa has orchestrated this whimsical and joyful piece, a surprising and beautiful outlier from a studio that mostly drenches their music in doom and gloom. I can't help but smile listening to this track, especially combined with the bright and gorgeous visuals of the fight. While I don't dislike the Sentient Pest as much as I did on my first playthrough, I still regard it as one of the weaker and occasionally frustrating fights in the game. Which is not to say the fight is actually bad, I still quite enjoy it, but in Elden Ring Nightreigne, you have some tough competition. Also, fun fact, Fortis Stone Shield is based on a scorpion species called a Vinegaroon. Isn't that cool? The Augur Maris, Fathom of Night, an unknown entity that drifts through the skies. It makes an ocean of its surroundings that it may blend with whatever life is found, as if in a dream. Exercise caution, warriors. The enemy may not always be that which can be seen. I'm sorry, Maris, and I'm sorry to all 3 people that like this boss. Visually spectacular, audibly fantastic, but mechanically really disappointing. If you're not playing a ranged-based character, of which there are only 2 in the entire roster of Nightfarers, or purposely take a bow from Linveld or the Great Hollow, you'll be spending most of your time chasing after this blue jellyfish thing, falling asleep both in-game and probably in real life too. When you finally manage to get close to it, it'll use splash on you in the form of some quite visually unintuitive waves. If you're lucky, maybe it will actually close the distance on you with this corkscrew spinny move, which will finally allow time to deal some damage. When not splashing you directly, you can find Maris dropping an atomic sleep bomb that has this awesome glimmer effect, summoning tentacles from the ground, or just falling asleep in the sand somewhere. The Everdark Sovereign introduces back the Storm Ruler, a From Software staple ever since 2009's Demon Souls, in the form of the signature weapon of the Nightfarer you're playing. All Nightfarers restore their FP by charging up the weapon, and you can release 2 different attacks depending on how much you charge it. You'll mainly be hitting Maris with the charged up attack, but every so often it will summon orbs around its head that will protect it from the vast majority of damage it receives until they're destroyed. And there you have the strategy. Use these smaller projectiles to destroy the orbs, and then destroy Maris with the fully charged shots. Certainly more engaging than running around for 2 minutes until you can hit the boss. You do have to be a bit careful when you fire the projectile, as most of the time they will miss, despite tracking pretty well. Augur's music shifts from deeply unsettling in Phase 1 to beautifully majestic in Phase 3. At first, it feels like it's underscoring a scene where a massive alien, such as Maris himself, just hovers above, staring at us. It isn't attacking, just watching. We don't know if it's harmless, and that uncertainty is what makes it so terrifying. Phase 3 is where it turns into a slow dance under the water, almost like we're now watching a performance by Maris. Don't get me wrong, Augur is far from the worst boss ever made. I would rather fight them over something like Valiant Gargoyles, but when compared to other Nightlords, the competition is fierce. I'll always love the visuals of the fight, if anything. For Nightreigne, however, I'd say he is the worst of the lot.
Make your choice. The time is ripe.
The equilibrious beast Libra, creature of night, a goat-headed being who pretends to be a man, said to be able to use a dubious form of alchemy. Counterfeit gold causes loss of sanity, beckoning madness. However, those who ferment madness are sure to succumb to the self-same malady in the end. True to his name, this demon embodies balance in everything he does. At the start of each encounter, he waits for the Nightlords, cloaked as a man, offering a deal, each one with both a benefit and a cost. That same duality carries into the pacing of his battle theme, the contrast between his stoic, composed movements and his sudden bursts of animalistic fury. The magic circles he summons have a scale symbol inside, his attacks drop stones that help stave off the madness that he deals, and the fact that he is weak to the very ailment he attacks with. Even his overall appearance, the half-man, half-goat-like beast occult figure of Baphomet, symbolizing the equilibrium of opposites, reflects this boss perfectly, as does the zodiac sign of Libra. Even his staff has what seems to be the Hand of Justice, a French symbol for balance attached to the top. He mostly attacks you with some extremely advanced magic, causing golden explosions, pyramids of madness, and a glyph that shoots madness stones in one direction. He'll also dash and teleport around quite often, especially if playing in a group, and will whip out some melee combos that are generally quite easy to deal with, but they do hit super hard. Libra will start meditating on the spot at multiple points during the fight, and many circular glyphs will appear around him. If any appear in the air and you don't have an eye, good luck, as whether or not you destroy all of them determines what the boss will do next. Successfully destroying them all will cause Libra to go berserk, as you have successfully interrupted his meditation and disrupted the balance, leaping at the nearest player multiple times with explosions of madness before dragging a frenzy down from the heavens. Failing to destroy them all, however, buffs the creature immensely, not only buffing his damage resistance and his damage output, but also causing other effects like the circles of frenzy spawning 6 more in a radius around you, and the turret glyph now rotates in place and lasts a lot longer. The Everdark Sovereign creature of night is quite the tough beast. At roughly 90% health, he will start summoning mimics of each Nightfarer on the field, along with one additional side effect with it, ranging from summoning an additional mimic that will attack the others, to having unlimited flasks, but each flask reduces your level. Once again, the theme here is balance. In regards to the mimics it summons, there are too many effects and nuances for me to talk about here, and this isn't a guide on how to beat the boss, but know that it is quite difficult, and the more players you have, the more harder it tends to be, as there are seemingly no limits to how many mimics can be spawned at once. He summons them quite regularly, can buff them in various ways, and becomes very damage resistant for everyone that's still alive. Despite all of this, Libra himself rarely gets involved, and once you realize that you only need to get a few good hits on the mimics, the fight becomes a lot more tolerable. The soundtrack for the Creature of Night is the most musically masterful chaos I've ever heard. The entire song makes no sense, but makes perfect sense at the same time. There are so many instruments in here I'd never even heard of, and so many strange and unnerving sounds created. I mentioned before that even the music matches the theme of balance, and what I mean by that is that the tempo and volume of the song is constantly changing, and this means you don't know what to expect next. It's so unsettling that it even plays with your sanity, like this part in Phase 3 where it just gets higher and higher and higher and higher to the point where you can't even comprehend what you're hearing. Libra, Creature of Night, is one of my favorite bosses in Nightrreign. The grotesque and inspired design of the creature itself, a mix of complex with easy moves, a harrowing soundtrack, and absolute unbridled chaos throughout. I'm more than happy putting your funny madness goatman into S tier. Dark Drift Knight, Fulghor, champion of Nightglow, an ancient centaur consumed by battle, his fervor for the gods he serves yet burns within, wielding a sacred form of the night's power. According to legend, the mightily radiant gods were able to conceal themselves in the roar of the thunder. Fulghor, with his high aggression and imposing form, was the boss that took the most attempts for me and my friends on our first playthrough. I'd say it's one of the only Nightlords in the game that I find is actually easier when facing solo. Because of the target swapping mid-combo, it can be vicious and quite tough to follow in this fight with how aggressive and fast he is. The key to it all is understanding this spear slam attack. There are 3 different variations depending on if and when you stagger him. Leaving him uninterrupted puts you and your teammates at the mercy of sporadic, holy spears erupting from the ground, adding unwelcome chaos and tension while you're already trying to figure out if you're the center of his attention or not. This isn't a detailed boss guide, so I'm not going to go into the other scenarios here, but I like that you actually have to react on the fly and consider where you and your fellow Nightfarers are positioned to figure out how best to deal with this attack. Fulghor is, of course, a centaur, and he makes sure to use the speed gained from his equestrian legs to his advantage. He's always dashing around the arena, throwing wind attacks at you, summoning holy spears, and unleashing this massive wave of holy damage across the field. Phase 2 becomes even more sporadic when he unleashes his inner Eudex Gundyr, replacing his missing arm with a grotesque mass of purple flesh. This arm is so powerful that it seems to control his body, yanking him in different directions and acting as the main source of power for his jumping slam attacks. The Everdark version of Fulghor is just brilliant. He regains his missing arm, the arena glows with holy light, and he gets access to a range of new attacks, from volleys of arrows to an utterly chaotic spinning combo with a holy twin blade. Both the progression of the fight from Phase 1 to Phase 3 and the music of the boss tell a story. Fulghor, champion of Nightglow, was once betrayed by the very gods he is trapped to serve, as well as by the comrades who severed his arm. Phase 1's music is his fury personified. Despite still being powerful, he is a shell of what he once was, yet he must do what he must to serve the gods. Phase 2's music leans more towards a candid reflection. Despite his arm transforming into a monstrous branch, Fulghor has no wish to be defeated and will fight by whatever means necessary. Finally, the 3rd phase is the most coherent of them all. The champion of Nightglow has regained his title, and that arm that was preventing him from reclaiming his former strength. The song is primarily focused on harsh male vocals, but at the end, women's voices join in, as if welcoming an army home from war. Altogether, Fulghor, champion of Nightglow, is a fantastic fight. The high aggression but fair attacks, brilliant design, bombastic music, beautiful attacks, and, as always, incredible animations make him one of my favourite bosses in the game. The Fisher in the Fog, Caligo, Miasma of Night, a prehistoric dragon that lurks within fog. The great shadowy pair of eyes, framed in frigid mist, are said to appear at history's great junctures. Its coldness can readily purloin the living warmth of its victims. I fear I may upset some people with my thoughts on this one. There hasn't really been a time I've fought Caligo and thought, wow, that was spectacular. Personally, I think FromSoft has still to this day not made a perfect giant dragon fight. I think every single one, Sin, Calamite, Midir, Bale, all have their fair share of issues. And unfortunately, Caligo is no exception. However, Caligo's issues lean more towards being a bit boring rather than being frustrating and unfair, which puts them a step above most others. Let's start with what I do like. It's impossible to look at Caligo and not be awestruck at their design. It's quite unique, with 4 wings that they can use to shield themselves and a really long neck. They're also massive, the biggest boss in Nightraigne by far, and they look right at home in the ice and the fog. I'd be remiss not to mention their music, of course, definitely a favourite amongst fans, and it is absolutely gorgeous, though it's not my favourite personally. I also like that for some attacks, you have to use audio and visual cues to locate them and avoid the damage. Unfortunately, my praises end there. Though not quite as egregious, Caligo sometimes suffers from the same issues as Maris, where you're spending 80% of the fight chasing after them. Even when you do get close to them, melee characters will be hitting the legs 99% of the time. Caligo's head moves around a lot, and the Frost Breath attack AoEs extend just a tiny bit too far out to make punishing them with headed strikes feel like a feasible strategy. To me, it just never feels like you're hitting Caligo the intended way. Fortunately, you can get quite frequent fire staggers, as the Miasma of Night's weakness to fire is quite apparent. Caligo's attacks mostly involve Frost Breaths and tail and claw melee attacks, and flying around throwing hailstones at the Nightfarers. The Everdark Sovereign version mainly adds some more annoying exploding ice stones around the arena and adds more resistance to fire. You can break Caligo's 4 armor sections, dealing a burst of damage to them before they repair it. Occasionally, Caligo will vanish into the fog, causing either the crackling of ice in a random direction, or cause a dark trail of winds to weave away from the Nightfarers, each attack causing the music to reduce itself to just the piano, and requiring different strategies to avoid damage. Regardless if you're facing the regular or the Everdark Sovereign, Frostbite is going to be your worst enemy here, but it's still not worth doing that god-awful mountaintops shifting earth for the resistance. Caligo's score is gorgeous. It is a beautiful orchestral set piece with a piano accompaniment complementing the vocals and the orchestra. Much like the boss itself, the track also feels the largest. It sounds very open stage, and it has a very endearing element of sadness in there. It almost makes me feel like we are the monsters here, invading Caligo's home while they fight only to defend it. I don't hate the fight with the Miasma of Night, especially the regular version. It's not as boring as Maris or as frustrating as the Everdark Sovereign Gnoster, but it's certainly not a flawless fight. I will never groan if I get them in Depth of Night, that's for sure, and they are a good addition to the roster of Nightlords. The night aspect, Heolstor the Nightlord. Beyond the boundless night, there lies the hazy figure of a person. That is the night's origin and enemy to the world. The signs shall reveal where the footprints of the primordial Nightlord lead. Heolstor the Nightlord is the final boss of base game Nightraigne, and let me tell you, he does not disappoint. The shape of Night is his deceiving first phase, adorned in a tattered garb holding one greatsword, the other sheathed on his back. Despite only showing a fragment of the Nightlord's true power, the swiping and thrusting attacks can be quite difficult to read here and carry him forward with surprising momentum. Eventually, the inert Dark Moon greatsword is unsheathed from his back and gives him access to many more combos. Beating the shape of Night causes Heolstor to fall to the ground, covering the arena in darkness before revealing himself once more in his true form, the sky transformed into a cosmic vortex. With his full power unleashed, Heolstor now has access to myriad attack combos, many of which being boosted by a buffed Dark Moon greatsword, all of which are very consistent and fun to dodge. Carrying him as well is super fun. He staggers frequently, enough to feel very rewarding, and every single one of his attacks are well animated and also telegraphed. At around half health, Heolstor will enter his second phase. My man will fly into the air, literally rip open the sky before crashing to the ground like a comet. Music explodes, the very ground the Nightfarers stand on becomes volatile, and Heolstor attacks without mercy. He's capable of inheriting the element of all Nightlords, including those in Forsaken Hollows, and this is determined by what color the sky is when he decides to create the rift. This element is then applied to many of his attacks and the geysers. Dark magic is a big part of this fight as well, with Heolstor utilizing it even when he's not empowered by a specific element. Many of his attacks have follow-up magic arcs or geyser lines that follow in whichever direction he swings his sword, and he can release the Onslaught of Night, where he conjures a miasma that launches homing magical orbs at the Nightfarers. Once again, the music is incredible. The Shape of Night segment starts off quite calm, relaxing almost, with high notes, almost making it sound like it's a slow dance of sorts. Phase 2 is sandwiched between these two gorgeous vocal segments that gives me chills every time I hear them, and Phase 3 is appropriately bombastic and heroic, and god damn it, it has the Nightraigne main theme in there, and that is absolute cinema. Although he did not and never will get an Everdark Sovereign version, it does not take away from this fantastic skirmish. Heolstor the Nightlord is very deserving of his S tier placement and is always an absolute pleasure to clash swords with. The Balancers, Weapon-Bequeathed Harmonia, 7 Valkyries clad in white armor. These servants of the heavens restore balance to the world by wielding heroic weapons that purify chaos. But even heroines must one day sleep, so why not retire early to the annals of history? I've dreamed of having 7 tall, beautiful women all wanting a piece of me at the same time. But after fighting the Balancers, I'm not so sure anymore. The weapon the Balancers have been bequeathed is a golden halberd spear hybrid, which they use to perform many standard melee swings with various timings and cast various magic spells, like a holy AoE and a trail of spears from the ground. Per player, there's only 1 or 2 Harmonia active at a time usually, but you always have to keep an ear out for a third one casting magic to the side. They're very easy to dodge for the most part, and they stagger quite easily, but you can still get overwhelmed if you're not careful. Once all 7 are defeated, the last one to fall rises again, assuming the role of Harmonia and resurrecting all of the Valkyries. This unlocks the ability for them to use some group attacks, starting with the crazy Onslaught, which is the phase transition. The fight plays mostly the same here, but focusing the main Harmonia should be a priority, as they make up the majority of the remaining health pool. She can also use many new attacks herself, meaning the 1 versus 1 scenarios are far more dangerous. The Everdark Sovereign strangely starts you off in phase 1 instead of 2. Once all the Valkyries are defeated this time, instead of the last one coming back to life and sprouting wings, she instead snaps her own neck, and suddenly what were once elegant and graceful Valkyries have now become horrifying, decaying husks of themselves. This stark tonal shift transfers to the music and their movesets as well, acting completely reckless, swinging their weapons mindlessly after gurgling and screaming in pain. Though they cannot teleport anymore, it doesn't matter much, as the speed in which they can run has them close the distance on you very quickly. Every 20 or 30% health or so, these Salvation Standard Bearers will take the question, "Would you still love me if I was a worm?" to a whole new level. Though it is a visual spectacle, the Leviathan here is the main reason I don't enjoy this Everdark Sovereign much. Although it's possible to interrupt this phase by popping all of the blood pustules on the worm, it's almost never worth it and is very difficult to do. This means whenever the Leviathan appears, you cannot feasibly attack the boss for over an entire minute, and are forced to stand there and just watch it, dodging a few attacks here and there. As I said, it's a great spectacle, it looks amazing, but once you've seen it once or twice, it really just becomes frustrating. I want to fight the boss, not watch it. Harmonia's music. Well, do I even need to say anything? My favorite part of this track is actually the beginning of Phase 3. I love how loud and choral the first two phases are, in contrast to how tragic the Everdark Sovereign version becomes. It reminds you that you're looking at the Balancers fallen from grace. The Balancers could have been a much worse fight, but the clear audio cues and insurance that only one or two will be active with melee at a time makes it a fair and fun encounter. Although I don't enjoy the Leviathan encounter much, the contrast shift in the Everdark Sovereign is brilliant, and it's also a pretty good fight. However, this boss, and all others we've spoken about so far, are still not as good as the final boss of the Forsaken Hollows. They saved the best until last. The Dreglord, Traitorous Straghess, a corpse fiend comprising countless bodies and discarded contritus. However, they are torn apart or pulverized. Their communal resentment writhes with determination, outwitting every form of annihilation. This obsessive mound of flesh, unlike any form of life ever to exist, has no obvious weakness. Straghess has become my favorite boss out of all of them in Nightrign and Elden Ring itself. Absolutely everything from his design, his story, the music, and the fight itself are stellar. This cloaked amalgamation of corpses wields a grotesque scythe axe hybrid of flesh and bone, and you can feel the crushing weight of it in every slam and every drag across the sand. You can empower it with Scarlet Rot, unleashing the corruption through 4 devastating AoE attacks that aren't overly difficult to avoid, but will punish mistakes severely. His immense size allows him to close distances in violent flurries of swings, though these assaults often leave him needing a moment to recover. Still, it's dangerous to grow too comfortable with this slower pace, as he's more than capable of catching you off guard with sudden, rapid backhand strikes. I highly recommend inheriting the Favor of the Rotted Woods. Despite him removing the Scarlet Rot immunity aspect of it in the second phase, it can still be immensely useful in the first, as occasionally he can rise up on a rotten monolith, which will explode in a massive area and start raining Scarlet Rot. Reaching the end of his first phase, he does not let back. With his loss imminent, the once treacherous Straghess succumbs to desperation, and all that's left is pure impulse. While he was once slow and lumbering, the Dreglord transformed into something far more terrifying, dashing across the arena with shocking speed, leaping great distances and unleashing relentless combos with his scythe, claws, and grotesque chunks of scarlet rotted flesh. As the music drops and stakes erupt from the ground, the fight's intensity surges. He uses those jagged pillars to ricochet across the battlefield, sending descending dregs crashing down into the arena. Failing to evade these assaults leaves few opportunities to retaliate, but Straghess is brilliantly designed in that precise dodges, especially at the tail end of his combos, reward you with satisfyingly strong windows for punishment. Traitorous Straghess' soundtrack is wholeheartedly my favorite piece of music ever created. It perfectly complements his grotesque form in Phase 1, capturing the horror and weight of his presence. Then in Phase 2, a beautiful female vocal takes center stage, adding an unexpected elegance that transforms the battle's emotional tone. The music's synchronization with his Phase 3 transition is another detail I deeply admire and is testament to the incredible care shown by both the fight's mechanical designers and composer Shoei Miyazawa. By Phase 4, the score carries an undertone that feels profoundly powerful. Straghess is not weakening, nor is he surrendering. He is still fighting with everything he has. He's just as powerful as he always has been, but in that moment, it no longer matters, because you, the player, the Nightfarers, have become stronger than him. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all for listening to me talk nonsense about the Nightlords in Elden Ring Nightrei. Take care.